that. And here with us now is Cully Stimson with the Heritage Foundation. Cully, thanks for joining us tonight. Great to have you. So does this have the potential to become a long, drawn-out case, or is it pretty cut and dry?
This is a misdemeanor push, at most an assault. And frankly, no prosecutor, including Larry Krasner, the Soros bought and paid for rogue prosecutor in Philadelphia, even charged this as a misdemeanor. No prosecutor, and I was a prosecutor at the federal and state level, would give this case any weight whatsoever. At most, it was a situation of mutual combat. Mr. Love, what an ironic name, against Mr. Houck, and Mr. Houck was defending his son. This is not a case that you would bring even in a misdemeanor court.
Cully, the Justice Department accuses Houck of violating what we just talked about, the FACE Act, attempting to injure, intimidate, and interfere with a Planned Parenthood volunteer. Do his actions constitute a violation of that law?
I don't think so from the evidence we've seen. And in fact, if you go back to the origination of the statute, it was none other than Senator Ted Kennedy who made it clear on the floor of the Senate that this act was not meant to cover people who were escorting people to the facility. It was only meant to cover people providing the actual abortion or people inside the facility. So I think that this defense attorney has a very good argument. I'm sure he'll make a motion to the judge to dismiss the case. And even after the government puts on their evidence at the halfway point of the trial, he'll make a motion for a finding of not guilty, in other words, a directed verdict. So I think I would rather be the defense in this case because I like winning, and I think the defense has the winning hand here.
Whether or not Mr. Houck is guilty, do you think the DOJ's response was proportional to the alleged crime, or was it heavy-handed, as you're suggesting?
That's outrageous. I mean, not only is it outrageous that they're sending essentially a SWAT team in to a religious man's house for a push, at most, if you believe the government's case, but his lawyers were already talking to DOJ, and he offered to turn himself in. And so, I mean, think about it a different way. If this was a situation where you had an abortion counseling office and pro-abortion people were out yelling and screaming and they pushed one of the people at the counseling, do you think the DOJ would bring a case against that? Of course not. This is a one-way ratchet, and this DOJ has way overplayed their hand for a push at most.
Cully, in Matt's report, we just heard the attorney for Mr. Houck say that Mark will testify and take the stand, as will his son. What does that suggest to you of the defense's case?
Well, first off, most defense attorneys, and I was one of those too, don't promise that your client's going to testify because, of course, it's the client's right to make a decision at the point in trial. We may not even get to that point. The government's case may fail at the midpoint if the judge takes the case away. But if it gets to that point, and if Mr. Houck exercises his right to testify in his own defense, then he's pretty darn sure that he was on the right and he was protecting his son. And if this young man has to take the stand, I'm sure the jury will lean in and listen to the young fella. Now, there may be video evidence, and I've read in some instances that there's video of this whole incident, and that would provide an objective view of what happened, and then the jury is going to have to make up their mind. But if he's convicted, you can be darn sure he's going to appeal.
Yeah. Mr. Houck's attorney says he was unfairly targeted by the Justice Department to make an example out of him. What do you make of that claim?
Well, look, I mean, you see DAs across the country refusing to prosecute misdemeanors, including assaults. Why is this Justice Department targeting a person for a push at most, which is probably mutual combat, because you have Mr. Love, who was being a vulgarian and getting in the face of this young man's son, and then you have this sort of mutual combat situation. So I'm not going to ascribe a motive. I just think it's a total waste of federal government resources when they could be going after career armed felons in cities who have guns, who are ex-felons, and charging them in federal court for ex-felon in possession. So this is an abuse of resources, I think, an abuse of process.
All right, Cully Stimson with the Heritage Foundation. We are out of time. Thank you so much for your insights on this case.